Hey, how's everyone doing? It's a holiday week. It's kind of nice. Who's traveling the furthest? Anybody going outside of Oregon this week? Ooh, New York. I have not been to New York in many, many years, but I do enjoy it, or I enjoyed it. No, excellent. Or is we talking upstate New York or the Big Apple, Manhattan there? Hey, Brooklyn. Cool. Well, yeah, I think you're going to win. There's probably nothing reasonable that you could travel to, I guess, unless someone's going down to Key West. But Florida Keys. Um, yeah, traveling from Oregon to New York has got to be the furthest you can go, or reasonably the furthest you can go within the US. Well, I'm going nowhere. So I think my wife and I are just going to hang out here at home and maybe try to get a little hiking in or something so that we get some exercise. Yeah, I bet it is. So you have to plan a big summer trip or something and head out that way. All right, well, let's get to some work here. So let's see, got a couple things I want to show you today. Specifically, and it looks like we got a pretty small group, so might be a few people that are already started their traveling. But where am I? I'm in the weekly activities and I'm going to scroll on down. I know this is really tiny, but we're in our week 10 folder. Make a note of this, mental note. I just turned on week 11. So for those that do have time, if you want to start looking at our week 11 stuff, go for it. I'm not confident what I'm going to be doing with classes for week 11. I'll probably just do like drop-in labs because I don't plan on showing you anything new in week 11. You're just going to be working on your last assignment, which can be worth up to 70 points. So it's kind of like a built-in extra credit. So, but week 11 does have some participation things to do. And it does have a quiz, which is kind of a comprehensive quiz built up of a bunch of topics. And then there is our last assignment, the hobby site. Um, so yeah, there's really nothing new for me to present or demonstrate during those classes. So I might just sign in during office hours. I'll keep it on. And that way, for those that are working on their mock-ups or their actual website, they can connect and share screens, and we can talk about how they might go about doing something. Um, so that's week 11. That's after Thanksgiving. And let me jump back over there, weekly activities and work. So what we are in is week 10. And because of the holiday, there's not much going on here in week 10. There's only a few resources that I want you to research. We're going to work on participation 10, I guess technically 10A. It's still just a measly 5 points, but we're going to work on that one together and shouldn't be any problem getting it done during our limited class time. And then there's after that, there's nothing except this colorful turkey. So there's nothing due Thursday, nothing due, there's no quiz due on Saturday, and no assignment due on Monday. You can obviously fix up some old assignments. If you're still working on those, I'll go through, since I'm going to be home this weekend, I'll be doing a bunch of grading and things like that. So definitely you can check those out. Otherwise, just kind of chill for a few days, and then you can get back and do that week 11 stuff next week. Okay. So what we're going to be working on is participation 10 input controls. That's a pretty weird, vague name, but basically an input control is an element that we can create with HTML, and then we'll style it a little bit with our CSS. And this would allow a user to put in input. Now, this topic is a little bit anticlimactic for us because I'm not necessarily going to have you use input controls on your final assignment. You'll be quizzed on them a little bit, just a little bit. But yeah, I don't have an official quiz, to go along with this week. So that's where we'd have normal ones there. So it's mostly just to give you a little bit of seat time, a little bit of hands-on practice with form inputs that you might use a little bit more often in another class. So I've got a JavaScript course going on, and they use input controls pretty much every week. So it comes in handy there. If you're going to take a course like PHP, which is coming up, I think this winter term, so if you're doing like the 133p PHP, knowing some form input controls will be helpful there. So we're going to practice the input controls, just the HTML side of things, a little bit of CSS on there, but really it's not going to be cool and functional. It's just going to help prepare you for some other class where you might use these a little bit more authentically. But yeah, we'll do a couple things that might seem, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And in fact, if I were to head over to, remember I'm in Blackboard, I'm in my teacher view here. If I was going to create an announcement, I see some information here, and these are form input controls that I'm looking at. So right up here where it says subject, this is a text box. So they've actually got it rigged up for a drop down. There's actually a slight version of that text box, but basically a text box. Over here, we have an input color. There's a way to do that. There's an input type color. So this is an input. User can input a color. Then we have this box down here, which is really big. It's called a text area box. So text area box allows you to add multiple lines. If I look on a little further, I see I've got these little circle buttons here. These are called radio buttons. And we're going to create those today so you can see how those work. So those are radio buttons. And then I've got checkboxes. Checkboxes are pretty neat. So we've got checkboxes. We'll do those today as well. We have a little calendar picker. That wasn't my intention to show you that one, but what the hell? Maybe we'll do that one too. So yeah, it's an input type date. So we can get a little calendar. Then they got a time input. This is actually not officially a time input. That's a select input, I believe. We'll do a select one as well. Another text box down here. And then we have a submit button off to the right. So those are a lot of form input controls. And there's actually several more that we might tinker with as well. But those are some of the most popular ones. So I want you to know how to create those. And our participation page, let me cancel out of this. Our participation page is going to be basically a little cheat sheet that you might use. You might save this cheat sheet, this web page, and then you can reference it next term or the term after in a course where you're going to use these a little bit more heavily. So hopefully you'll be saving all of the pages that you're making. So that way, if you continue doing web page stuff beyond this term, you've got the opportunity to do so, and you can reference those old files and kind of remind yourself of how to do some of these things. So let's see, what do I need to do here? I've already started a blank page. It's not very exciting. I don't have a CSS file. I think I'm going to do internal CSS today, just so it's all self-contained into one page. I've got a page open, and in anticipation of what we're going to do, I wanted to show you a couple of other things. Earlier today, I was making a couple demo pages for some of your classmates, some in this class, some in other classes. And in the process of making these demo web pages for various things, I had the occasion to really use what are called the Emmet feature, the Emmet add-on to Visual Studio Code. A couple of you have seen me use Emmet shortcuts a number of times, but I haven't drawn attention to them so much. But today I was doing some stuff where the Emmet shortcuts really helped big time. So in order to do these, I referenced a cheat sheet. So I've got a cheat sheet right here, and I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it right into the chat window. Now, you don't need it for this class. Technically, you don't need it for any class, But if you know for a fact you're going to be making web pages beyond this term, and you know for a fact your web pages are going to be stepping up in complexity, it's probably in your best interest to start to review some of these. And I want to demonstrate a couple of them, because in the process of using them today and looking through the cheat sheet so I would know how to do them, it really reminded me of how friggin' helpful this stuff can be. So I'm going to move my cheat sheet back off to my other screen, and I'll just put it there so I can kind of glance at it. And let me give you a quick example. In fact, this part you can do. This is in Visual Studio Code, and image shortcuts are already built in, by the way. And by the way, it does help if you go ahead and save your page as an HTML file so that it knows that it's an HTML file. So I've got a blank file here that's saved as an HTML web page. And I'm just going to type in a exclamation mark. Now I see I've got a few options. If I type a single exclamation mark and press my tab key, I'm going to get one thing. If I do 3 exclamation marks and press my tab key, I'm going to get something else, or enter key. Let's find out. Enter key. There we go. That's pretty good. So that's a really quick way for me to put all that content in there. Now, if I had done 3 exclamation marks and press enter, I just get a doc type definition. Okay. But if I do 1 and press enter, I get a pretty nice little chunk of built up code here. It gives me the doc type definition, language attribute, meta character encoding. I get this meta here for IE Edge. I'm not 100% sure what the value of that is anymore. I think this is all pretty accurate and up to date. Edge is pretty good, so I don't think this is really necessary anymore. But I get my meta viewport. That's pretty cool. And it gives me a generic title in there. I'm going to go ahead and change that out. Yeah, I know, super handy. So I don't like to show these definitely in the beginning of the term, because I don't want you to rely on them too much, because I really do like the fact that we can type things over and over. But we're in week 10, you know, and now that I know that you can type this stuff, I would like you, especially if you're going to keep making web pages, to know a few tricks of the trade just to go through it faster. So I'll just go ahead and put in here, this is going to be a participation. I can never spell the word participation instantly. I always got to sound it out. Participation 10, I'll say 10A. And this is going to be, I'll just call them form controls. Good enough. Okay, that's not even the coolest image shortcut. So let's see, I'm going to head down to the body of the page. H1, participation, 10A, controls, perfect, nothing fancy there. So here's the one I want to do. So earlier today in this demo file I was making, I needed to create several sections, and I wanted each section to have its own ID, its own custom ID. And I knew there was a way in Emmet to do this automated wise. I just didn't know what the syntax was. So I opened up my cheat sheet and I looked and found it. And it was actually quite easy. And I did it. It was freaking cool. And I want you to be able to do those things too. So here's the example I'll give you. Let's see, I'm going to create an article. Now, just kind of watch what I type here first. I'm going to write the word article, but notice I'm not doing any angle brackets or anything like that. And you can even see Emmet is trying to help me out with some stuff. I'm going to show you some simpler things right now. I've actually kind of jumped over to a more complicated use of Emmet. So I'm just writing the word article, no space. And then I'm going to write an angle bracket. I think that's what I want to do. Let's find out. And then I'm going to do a parentheses. I'm making this up as I go. I did not test what I'm showing you before class, which is probably not a smart thing to do. I do like to test out a few of the trickier things I'm going to demonstrate in class, but I didn't do that today. So let's see, I'm going to do a set of parentheses. And then in those parentheses, I'm going to write div hashtag example $, angle bracket. I could be telling you the wrong thing. In fact, I might have you just watch what I'm typing first and let's see if it works, because I'm literally making this up as I go. Angle bracket, and then I'm going to do, how do I want to do this? I want to do H2 angle bracket, example, space, $sign. Ooh, I don't know if that's going to work. Let me try this. And I'm going to say times 10. Okay. I don't think this is going to work because I'm not even getting an Emmett thing here. So let me see what happens if I press my enter key. Actually, let me copy this. I'm just going to go for it. Enter. Of course, that didn't work. I think my problem is this. $sign, closing parentheses, times 10. I think that space was breaking it. I think this is going to work. Let me try it. And if it works, fantastic. You'll be impressed with me, and then I'll type it again. Yeah. Didn't do what I was hoping. It tried to make a tag out of that example too. There's another syntax in there for actually putting the text in, and I can't remember what that syntax is, but still pretty neat. Okay. So I'm going to Control Z to undo, and I'm going to simplify this a little bit. Ooh, I don't want to, let me just select all of this and delete. Okay. So I'm going to try this again. We'll go a little bit simpler here. So I'm going to write the word article and do this one with me. I'm going to write the word article, angle bracket, parentheses, div, hashtag, example, $sign, give me $2, angle bracket, H2, closing parentheses, times 11. Okay. So that's what I want you to write. No spaces at all in there, by the way. So article, angle bracket, opening parentheses, div, hashtag, example, $sign, angle bracket, H2, closing parentheses, asterisk 11. Once we see the glory of this working, in fact, I'm going to take a screen capture of it. Yeah, I guess I'll get all that. Open it in my image editor. I'll just put that off to the side. There you go. So that's what you're going to type. Oops, let me redo the 11. So, okay. And then just press your enter key. Okay. So what did this get me here? It got me a set of article tags. There's a closing article tag all the way down there. And within that article, it gave me 11 sets of div tags. And each of those divs has an ID with a different ID, the word example, and then I've got 01, 02, 03. I did $signs. That's what gave me a double-digit number. And then within those divs, there's a headline 2, which is just waiting for me to put some content in there. And obviously, you could have done this a little bit more complicated with more stuff. There is a way to write it, so it could have automatically put the headline text in there. But yeah, that's pretty neat. So let me put this back up on my screen here. This is my screen capture of what I typed. So no need to worry about it this week. But if you ever catch yourself typing something that seems repetitive in your HTML, then investigate that Emmett cheat sheet. And there's a link for that in the chat. Investigate that a little bit more and start to practice those. Like I said, I know some stuff in the Emmett syntax, but I didn't know everything. And I had to look up the cheat sheet in order to figure out how to do this. But it reminded me how useful it is. And I'll tell you, when I typed it this time for you, I didn't reference the cheat sheet. So just by doing it a few hours ago this morning was enough to kind of start to remind myself how to do it. I'll use it several more times. I'll type it out. And if you type this stuff multiple times, it will start to stick. And if you keep working in VS Code and on web pages once or twice a week during the break and stuff like that, then I think you're going to be in pretty good shape for winter term with whatever classes you might take there. So that kind of stuff. I'm going to do a few more things with Emmett, but they're going to be super simple. Still very helpful, though. I'm using coffee today with my USB-powered mug. It's got a heater built into it, so it keeps it at exactly 145 degrees. All right, so that's pretty neat. That's okay. I don't need this anymore. It's in this video if people need to pause there. I'm gonna say no, don't keep that. So yeah, fun stuff. The coffee cup, I will put a link to that. It was a gift. If I had to buy it myself, I would not get it because it's like friggin' $100. And it's cool. I don't know if it's $100 cool, but it's pretty cool. It's called Ember. My mom got it for me from Costco. Or not Costco, from Amazon. She did tell me Costco had one, but it wasn't ours. Must be one in Eugene or something like that. So you might be able to find these at some Costco's. So I got the 10-ounce one, but she said the 14-ounce one was $100 at Costco. They got Black Friday sales, but check Amazon. They might have it there for a decent price or decenter. Who knows? But yeah, that's it right there. And my wife's got one too, and they're pretty neat. And there's a little app you put on your phone or tablet so that you can set the temperature. So if you're a big coffee drinker, I'm not, but I'm getting into it. It's kind of nice, and it's got a special little charger plate that I put it on like a coaster, but it's charger, and yeah, it's got a power button down there, but I never turn it off. And yeah, keep it charged up, and it's kind of pleasant. So yeah, there it is, Ember mug. And make a travel one. There we go. Kind of a nice little web page too. Ooh, I still need to come up with a final exam web page. I need to make that. So final exam web pages. Yeah, they're going to have a bunch of different skills in there, but definitely there's going to be some section where there's going to be some side-by-side content, if not 2 items, maybe 3 items side by side. And it'll be responsive, so that way things look good even on a narrow or small device. Yeah, the Ember mug. Ooh, gold. That's fancy. All right. So let's see. Back over on my code here. So I said I was going to do some internal style. So let me go ahead and plan for that. I'm going to show you a few more little Emmett things that are kind of neat. So obviously I can do that. So I'm going to do my reset rule, but instead of spelling things out, I'm going to do M:0 tab, and that automatically puts in margin 0. I'm going to do P:0 tab, and that puts in padding 0. I'm going to do BD:0. Yep, BD:0 tab. And I'm going to do BX. Yeah, BX. And I can just press tab right now, and it'll give me box sizing border box. So I'm really just having to type a couple characters for each of these things. I'm going to do that again because it's so easy to do. So let's see, I've got my curly braces. I'm going to type M:0 tab, P:0, well, let me do a space, P:0 tab, space, B:0, no, that's not what I want, BD:0 tab, space, and then BX tab. So a couple keystrokes, and we've got a whole bunch of stuff that would normally. So I know it seems like, we're saving ourselves seconds, but over and over, there you go. All right, that's pretty fun. Let's do a little bit of styling here now. Body of my page, I'm going to do a background color. RGB, I'm going to do 150, 200, 200. Gives me a nice shade of blue. Color of my font. Check this out. I'm going to do F::tab. And it gives me a 1M font with a sans serif font. I like that one. That's pretty neat. That was just F:. So that was pretty fast. Yeah, I'm good with that. H1 and my H2s for that matter. I'm going to do color, orange, red. Ooh, there's probably a text-align center, Emmett, right? TXT, : C, E, no. TXT gives me text align and then center. All right. Okay, feeling pretty good about that. Well, there is a MT is margin top, colon. Now, if you want to do a number, then you just put in the number. You don't have to put the PX. So I can do MT : 12, or maybe I'll do like 20 tab, and that gives me margin top of 20 pixels, and then MB : and maybe I'll do 14 to get a margin bottom of 14 pixels. So saving a little bit of time here. Now I'm going to see how this page is looking. I haven't even loaded it up yet. So let me just kind of look at my browser here. Yeah, looks fine to me. Let me zoom in. Not that much, just a shade. Cool. So there's my web page. All right, well, let's get to our first example. So then it'll kind of make sense of what's going on here. So our first example for form inputs is going to be the very common text box. So I'm putting this right down here in my first example. Just give my line spaces there. And it's going to be a text box. Now, to really do this properly, I would actually be using a set of form tags. I think I'm going to hold off on the form tags, though, because we're not making functioning forms, but there is, a set of form tags. And the form tags would have things like method equals post, action equals the URL to a server-side script, maybe something like that. And so if somebody submits a web form, this action attribute tells the browser where that form data is supposed to be sent to for processing. If you're doing this in a PHP class, then you will be using that, because this would lead to a PHP script, which would take that form data, process it, and then do something with that data. Add it to a database, maybe display some output to the user, and stuff like that. So there's a number of different things you could do there, but it's not going to come up in this class. With the method attribute, there's method equals post, method equals get, and that basically indicates how the data is sent via the form. Is it sent as part of an HTTP request, or is it sent more privately? And there's pros and cons to each method, and there's different reasons why you might use each particular method. Again, doesn't really factor into what we're doing today. So even though the form tag is useful, since I'm not asking you any too many quiz questions on it, I'm just not going to use it. So there is a set of form tags, and you can have multiple forms on a web page. Each form gets its own set of opening and closing form tags. So I'm not going to use it. Instead, I'm going to focus on the things that would go inside of the form. And I'm going to do quite a few of those. So the text box, there's an input tag. Now, the input tag is pretty generic. In fact, I could just do input. That is complete right there. Not very exciting, but it does do something. And you're probably not going to be able to appreciate it very much. There it is. You can just kind of see it over there. Let me do this real quick. I'm going to go to the body of my page, and I'm going to set p:12 to do padding of 12 pixels all around the body of my page. And there you go. An input tag creates a little text box, and I can type text right in there. Pretty neat. However, you would probably never do this in real life. The input tag has varieties. For instance, we can do type equals text, which is not going to make anything because the default is type equals text, but you could change this out quite a bit, and you'll see this very, very soon. So I've got type equals text, and that's not going to look any different. All right, let me make something look different though. I'm going to create an attribute selector. Attribute selector goes in your style, and it'll look like this: input square bracket type equals text, closing square bracket, come on, and then curly braces. And then I can do something like this. I can say, ooh, you know what? I'm going to go, we'll do font size 1.5M. That should make it pretty big looking. There we go. That looks good to me. And I'll also do p:8, padding of 8 pixels. So I'm using more of those little Emmet abbreviations, p:8 to get padding of 8 pixels. And so now we can see the text right in there pretty easily. So I've got a little bit of style here. There it is in the chat window. And the HTML is quite simple looking. Input type equals text. However, we're going to tweak this a little bit. We're going to do more to this input. For instance, whenever you do most form elements, you're going to want to have a label so the visitor knows what the purpose of that text box is. So in front of my input, I'm going to do a label, and I'm going to use a for attribute with, I'll just call it text1. And then enter text : So now I'm also going to do an ID in my input, ID equals text1. So I know I'm just running out of room here, but I wanted you to see these all in one line for now. I've got a label that's using a for attribute of text1, and I've got an input that's using an ID attribute of text1. The important thing here is that the for attribute of the label is the same as the ID attribute of the control of the input. That connects them together. So the label has a for attribute. My element in question, my input, has an ID attribute that match up. So now when I look at this on my browser, I see, I've got the enter text label over there. But check this out. I can click on the enter text label. I'm literally going to click on the word enter text, and it activates that input, and it puts my insertion point right in there. So clicking on the label activates the form input. This is a very good ADA accessibility feature. So that's why I want you to get in the habit of doing that. Now, there's another way we could have done this too. We could have put our closing label tag on the other side of the input, but I like this method a little bit better. Here's what I'm talking about. If my label tag, my closing label tag, was all the way over there after the input, and I didn't have the for attribute and the ID attribute, it still would have worked pretty cool. So that's another good way to do it. But I'm not going to do it that way. So I'm going to Control Z, put that back the way it was. And now I'm going to put this input on another line just so you can see them on separate lines. It doesn't change anything. I've got my label on one line and I've got my input on another line, but on my web page, notice they're together. This should give you some indication about the label element and the input element. Would you think these are inline elements or are they block elements? Just type it in the chat if you know the answer. Are they inline or are they block? Guys are quiet today. They are inline elements. Yeah, that looks pretty good, I guess. It's good enough. Yeah, so do a little padding on the right. PR for padding right, colon 8 for 8 pixels. Padding right, 8 pixels. You need a little extra room over there. Yeah, so labels are inline, inputs are inline. Now you can change those, of course, and make them block if you want, but it's not too bad. Now there's a few other things. I'm still going to leave it as the text box, but there's actually different varieties of type equals text. For instance, you can do type equals password. Type equals password. Oops, let me change my styling here. Bear with me on this. And actually, you might do this too. This is going to be an attribute and group selector. There's input type equals password. Input type equals email. Input type equals tel, I think it is. I can't remember if it's tel or phone. Anybody know? Input type equals tel or input type equals phone? Input type tel. Yeah, it's tel. T-E-L. So basically what that means is I can change this to type equals password. Well, it looks exactly the same, but now when I type, it gives me those little dots. It hides the password from view. So there's type equals text for a normal text box, which is the default. Type equals password if you want to have those little dots in there. Type equals tel is going to look just like that. It doesn't look any different. And in fact, for that matter, type equals email is also going to look the same. And for that matter, there's also a type equals URL. So there's type equals URL, type equals tel, type equals email. what's the difference between all of these other ones like email and URL and telephone and tel if it looks exactly the same? Well, the difference is on a mobile device. If I'm using type equals email and somebody's looking at this page on a mobile device, their little keypad is going to show the @ symbol. It's going to give me a keyboard, which is a little bit more common to entering email addresses. If I do type equals tel, it's going to give me a number pad like I'm typing in a phone number. If I do type equals URL, I'm going to get a keyboard that's usually going to have like the HTTP or the .com at the end and stuff like that. It's going to give me a keyboard which is more suited to typing in web addresses. So you don't really appreciate the benefit of the differences here on our desktop computers, but on a mobile device, they'd be pretty darn useful. I'm going to go back to boring old type equals text because that's kind of like the foundational one. Obviously, you can still enter web addresses and email addresses with this, but you take away that very useful feature for mobile users where they have that custom keyboard. All right, now there's a couple other things we can do with this as well. We could put in a placeholder. If I can spell the word placeholder. Placeholder, there we go. Just tab and let it do it for you. Placeholder, and this would be a sample text entry or something like that. So you can put a placeholder on a text box and it'll even put that right on there in the text box. And then when I click, it'll go away, or when I type, it'll go away to something else. But I can, so there we go. That's pretty nice. Placeholder is pretty good. We can also do max length equals something like 10. So if you want to limit the number of characters, normally a text box, I think, is limited to about 255 characters, but you could change that limit. Max length of 10 means at some point it's going to block me from typing more than 10 characters in that text box. I'll go ahead and leave that for 10. So how's everyone doing so far? This is just our first example. I know I'm going super slow on this first text box, but and I should probably be doing several, but I think that's fine. And then we'll go faster over the next few here. All right, let's move on to the next one. So I'm going to, for the next one, let's do something like this. This is a fun one, I think. Range slider. You've seen these before. So with a range slider, I'm going to have a label for range 1. I'll choose select value as my label. And then after my label, I'm going to have input type equals range. I'm going to go ahead and put in a few other things here as well. I'm going to do value equals 50, min equals 0, max equals 100, step equals 1. That's it. So some of these weren't essential, but I want to show you examples of some of these other attributes we can use here. So we're getting this is a type equals range, which is quite a bit different than type equals text and all that other stuff. Basically, my range slider is going to be able to go from 0 to 100. Step of 1 is it's going to count by ones. Obviously, I could have done step of 2 and it would count by twos. In fact, I'll do that, step of 2. I'm going to start at 50, which means it should be right there in the middle, which would be different than if I started at, let's say, 20. Now it should be a little bit more to the left. So value of 20, min of 0, max of 100, step of 2. Let's see what this looks like. There it is right there. It's got this little range slider. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger looking. Got a typo for that. Let's fix that. I guess I'll do this up here. Input square bracket type equals range. Let's see, I'm going to do transform scale 2.5 Now this is probably going to look a little bit messy at first because it kind of covers up my label. So I just need to adjust it a little bit. What if I did, can I do margin? ML colon 20. Let me see what that does. Well, that helps. It does help. 100. That's better. Yeah, 100 looks pretty good for that label. There would be better ways to do this, but I think that's good enough for now. Now, my range slider is very likely going to look different than your range slider. That's because I'm using the Opera browser, and I bet very few of you are using Opera. The browser is what controls the finished look of a range slider. And you can style a range slider, but it's not trivial. And I don't have it all memorized at how to style a range slider, but I'd have to look it up. But yeah, you can style a lot of this stuff in pretty neat ways. And that's probably what a lot of professional sites do. I'm just going to leave this on here. Now, it's kind of a neat control. You know, it gives us this little thing that we can move left and right. Of course, we could also rotate it so that it would be moving up and down. That's another way to go. But it's kind of boring because we don't see the value. So we're going to do a small amount of JavaScript so that you can see what's going on here. After my range slider, my input type range, do this for me. Give me a paragraph ID equals range output. And I'm going to type a number in there. The number I put in this paragraph is the same as the number that is my starting value for my range slider. Now I'm going to do a couple things here. And I've already screwed something up. I don't have an ID. So I've got label 4 range 1, but I never did my ID. So here's what I want you to do. Make sure that your input type range has an ID attribute. And of course, it should match up with the 4 attribute. So it definitely needs an ID attribute because we're going to do a wee bit of JavaScript. And then I want a paragraph and give that paragraph an ID as well. Doesn't matter what you call it, but make a note of what you did because you're going to need to reference it. And then I'm going to do a little script right after this. So right after this example, do a set of script tags. And just, I'm going to put this in the chat window so that you can copy and paste it. But if you want to type along with me, go for it. Document.get element by ID. And I want to get my range 1 event listener input. I know I'm doing this fast. Bear with me on that though. Do I want a function there? I do want a function there. I'm going to do that. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to document.get element by ID. Now I want my range output. Spell it properly. Inner HTML is going to be equal to this dot value. I think that's going to work. Put a semicolon down there because I like it. Let me test it real quick before I share this with you. Yeah, it looks like it's working. I'm just looking at the little number down here beneath my select value. I just want to see that change higher and lower as I slide that slide rule there. All right, so what have I got going on here? Well, a couple key things. Of course, I've got my input and my paragraph. I'm going to share that in the chat. So that's my input, my paragraph. And then, of course, I've got this little chunk of script down here. Copy and paste. There we go. So that's also in the chat. And you can just barely make out the whole thing. There it is. So everything's kind of visible right there. So if you're going off the video recording, you could pause here and type that out. Not essential for what we're doing in this class, but because the range slider value was kind of hidden from users, it's nice to be able to display that on screen somewhere. So basically what's going on with this script is we're taking the input, the value from the input device here, and we're displaying it in between the opening and closing paragraph tags. That is the essence of what's going on. We're taking the value from one field and we're displaying it between the opening and closing tags of another element. So that's what all that's doing. Okay, I'm gonna take a little victory sip of coffee, 145-degree coffee. Okay, so pretty happy with that. Now we've got the input text box and we've got a range slider. Let's try a couple more. So I'm going to go down to example 3 here. And if I don't get to all 10 examples for the participation, I'll just change the directions. I've got that kind of power. If we only do 8, then that's all we'll need to do for our participation. So example number 3, let's do something that could be fun. How about if we do color input? Let's get some colors. Let's see. Label 4 equals, I'll say color 1. Select a color, colon. Input type equals color. ID equals color 1. I think that's all we need. I honestly have never used this color input in a real life web page. I've done it a couple times just as part of a demo, like in class, but I've never had the occasion to really test it out, to really see how it works. So I'm kind of excited. This is going to be another one that's probably going to look different for each of us, because your browser is probably going to manipulate how this thing appears. So it'll be interesting to see how it looks on my Opera browser compared to whatever browser you happen to be using. I think that's all we need. So let's see what we get here. So I get a little block, and if I click on that block, I get this little gradient color selector, and I can choose this, and it gives me RGB values. That's pretty neat. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Let's see, who was in class here today? Oh, good. Lupita is here. Lupita, if you've used this color selector before and you kind of recall what the script value gets us, then let me know. Otherwise, I'll test it out real quick. So yeah, so that's kind of neat. Now, of course, it's kind of boring just to have that there. So let's see what little mess we can get ourselves into with some more JavaScript. I'm kind of going off script here a little bit. I wasn't planning on doing this one. I can't find my page anymore. There it is. So let me try this here. I'm going to go back to my code. I'm going to do another little script. Let's see. I'm going to let color value equal document.get element by ID color 1 dot value. Yeah, I'll just do it this way. I'm going to say color. Let's do that. And I'm going to say document.body.style.background color is equal to my color.value. Let's see if that does anything of interest. Will that work? No, that will not work. I have to write it this way. My ID 1 listener. Ooh, what do I want to do? Click, select. Lupita, have you used this? Is it change? Do we do change? I bet change will be it. Function, parentheses. I'll share this with you, of course, in chat as well. All right, I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to take these and I'm going to stick them up there. I'm going to tab, 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 tab. I think that's going to work. Let me test it here and find out. select red. Yeah, okay, changes to red. And I'll select green. And I click away, changes to green. Yeah, it's not like there doesn't seem to be an OK button or anything like that. So I just choose something and click, and there it goes. Alrighty, so let me copy that script. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, keeping track of many of these. So it's often just an experiment. I'm wondering now if input would have been cooler. Let me see what happens if we do input instead of change. That might be neater. Ah, it is better. Yeah, input is often a nicer way to go because then we can see it change right away, right in there. Okay, so all I did is I changed the word change to input. That's nicer. So let me copy that, stick it in there. Okay, so in the chat, we've got that going on. So obviously you can tell what's happening, I bet, based on the color that we select from our color input, we're changing the background color of the body of the page. And my input is pretty simple looking. It's type equals color. And I've got an ID on there. That ID is important because the ID helps correspond not only to the label, but it also helps work with the script. Get rid of that extra space. Yeah, nice little fun use. Yeah, select a color. So we've got our range slider, we've got a color picker, and we've got a text box. Text boxes are by far the most common element that you might use. The code, oh yes, let me do that. Let me scroll to the right. I think that is all the code that's right there. Let me scroll it up just a little bit. So if people are looking at the screen recording, they can pause right there. Yeah, it is a little bit finicky. Curly braces and commas and quotes. You notice I'm using a lot of single quotes here instead of double quotes. Double quotes work, by the way. It's my habit with JavaScript to do a lot of single quotes, whereas in HTML and CSS, I do a lot of double quotes. So that's basically what's going on. So whenever I change the input of my color1 color object, my input, it's going to set that value for the color to the background color of the web page. That's basically what's going on there. Yeah, it can be fun. And of course, we're changing background colors of web pages, but we could have changed font color and stuff like that too. Yeah, it's a tricky syntax to learn for sure. And it's, oh boy, if this letter E right here was typed in lowercase instead of uppercase, it would break. It wouldn't even work. So it's very finicky about how you type in uppercase versus lowercase. It's a very case sensitive language. Get element by ID has to be written just like that. So kind of weird. But I'm definitely going to publish my page. So you'll have a copy of that as well. Let's see. Let's move on to something a little bit less exciting, less colorful. And I'm going to look down here at my example number 4. We're still working on input controls. These are all input controls. And let's see. The next one I want to show you is going to be radio buttons. Radio buttons are fun. And I'm going to do now. Oh, radio buttons are a little different. With radio buttons, we typically do the input first and then the label second. That's different than what I've been doing so far. So far, it's been label first and then the input. Same thing with my text, with my range slider and my text box. It's label first and the input. But with radio buttons, we typically do the input first. So I'm going to do input type equals radio. I'm trying to remind myself here. They want to share the same name. Name equals, let's say, we'll do shipping. That's boring. Let's do it this way. I want to make it more generic. Let's do, let's say group 1. Same name, different values. Value 1. And then different radio 1. Okay, so I think this is going to be good here. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to have my input, and then I'm going to have a label for, of course, the label for matches up with the input ID. So this is going to be for radio 1. And then I'll say radio 1, very boring label. That's pretty good. And then I'm going to do a break tag. And I'm going to select this whole thing. Another little VS Code trick. You just select, Control C to copy, and then Control V as in Victor. Victor, oh, it's not doing it as well as I hoped, but that's okay. I'm going to do 3 of these. Paste. Okay, so I've got 3 of them. A couple things are going to stay the same. Some things will change. Let's see, the types will all be radio. The names are all going to be group 1. The values will change. The IDs will change. And of course, my label text will change. The 4s need to change. So pretty much everything changes, but what doesn't change? The names don't change. So when you're doing radio buttons, you're generally always going to have at least 2 radio buttons, maybe 3 or 4, but there's radio buttons give you options. And you use a radio button when you want the user to only select one option from the set. So this group of radio buttons all share the same name. If I mess up on that, it means the person could choose multiple radio buttons, which we don't want to ever happen. So I'm pretty sure this is going to look okay. I might have to do some styling though. So let me jump over to the page and look at it. Actually, that's pretty good. I'm not too disappointed with that, but I'm going to make those radio buttons a little bit bigger. So I am going to look at my CSS real quick. And I think I can do this here. Input square bracket type equals radio. It's not as nice as I was hoping. I'm going to do it separate. So let me get rid of that. Input square bracket type equals radio. So basically, what am I doing with these selectors? Well, since all of these tags have the same input, I'm relying on the attribute value combination within the tag in order to customize the styling. I want to style my radio buttons a little bit differently than my range slider. So I'm going to do a transform scale. Maybe I'll do a 3 there and see how that looks. That looks hideous. I'll do a 2. That looks better. And then I'm going to do maybe a little PR. PR for padding right of 8. How does that look? That doesn't do anything for me. What about margin right? That's better. There we go. Yeah, I think that's good. So basically my CSS, I'm using transform scale quite a bit today. You can probably tell what's happening here. Transform scale will help increase the size of an element. Now there's several ways you can do that. Now with my text box, I just changed the font size. Font size is a great way to change the size of an element like a text box. However, for my range slider and my radio buttons and my checkboxes, when I get to those, I'm using transform scale. Obviously doubling the size or 250% of the size, so you can control that value in there to make those elements bigger. And I should be able to select, here we go. So I can just click on my labels and I can choose one of these 3 radio buttons. So let's go back to the HTML, make sure everyone's feeling good about that. So really, I just did one of these and then I did a copy and paste and then changed to a few other versions. So like I said, with radio buttons, you're generally not going to have just one, you're going to have 2 or more, but you're not going to have like 50 or anything like that. Usually just a small grouping. And radio buttons are useful because it gives the user the ability to choose one, where's my little dark screen, one from the selective options. What if you want them to be able to choose 2 from the options? Well, you don't use radio buttons for that, use checkboxes. So there's our 4th input control example. Hopefully my coffee slurping is not too distracting in the microphone. I just realized it's, like, it's probably not as bad as the coughing or something. So. All right, that's pretty good. Little radio buttons, nice. You can click right on the radio button to select an option. So shipping might be a good one, or gender. Whenever you want to give a user just a few items that they can select only one from, radio buttons are a great selection for a great choice for that. All right, let's see what else we can try here. I'm going to head down to example number 5. Example 5 is going to be checkboxes. Checkboxes and radio buttons are very similar in structure. In fact, if I was going to be a little lazy, and why not be, I could select one of my radio buttons and its label, copy it, paste. Now I'm going to change it out. Instead of type equals radio, type equals checkbox. I still like them to have the same name. I'm going to call it group 2 though. I don't want it to have the same name as my radio button set. And of course, the value can be the same. That can be value 1. This will be check 1, label for check 1. And then I'm going to put checkbox 1. I'll spell it out so it looks different. Okay, now that I've got that first checkbox, I'm going to copy that. Paste, paste. All right, this is still going to be a checkbox, type equals checkbox. The name is going to be group 2. The value is going to be value 2, value 3, check 1, check 2, check 3, and then 4, check 3, check 2, and then checkbox 2 and checkbox 3. Adin 2, 3. So. Similar to the checkbox, similar to the radio button structure. It's input first, then the label. My 4 attributes still match up to the ID attribute for the element. That hasn't changed. They share the same name, although it's not as critical as it is in the radio buttons. Each checkbox has its own value. That's actually kind of important. Not so important for what we're doing, but if we were using JavaScript to get this information, that would be important there. And of course, you never have 2 elements on the same web page that have the same ID. That part has actually been true the entire term, even though I haven't stressed it as much as I should have. So there's never 2 elements on the same web page with the same ID. And before I even go to my browser and check this out, I'm going to head up to my styling, and I'm going to do this with the radio button. Same kind of concept. Input square bracket type equals checkbox. I want my checkboxes and my radio buttons to both be double in size and have a little bit of margin right, because it'll make them look a little bit chunkier, a little bit better looking on the page. And if I look at these, there they go. So now I have little check boxes right down there. Now you'll notice with the check boxes, I can select multiples. With radio buttons, I can only select 1 out of the set. With check boxes, I can check 2 or 3 out of my set of 3. So that's the key difference between check boxes and radio buttons. Now, what if you want to check a box by default for your visitor? Let's try this. Go to one of your check boxes, maybe the first one, and put in the word checked. This is a weird attribute. I don't think we've done this yet, but there are some attributes that don't have a value, and that is one of them. So by putting the checked attribute inside of one of our checkboxes, or you could do it in 2 of them if you wanted, it's going to default check that. So now if I go to my web page and refresh it, my first checkbox item is pre-checked. This is called in marketing terminology a negative check. Basically, the customer or the visitor has to deselect it if they don't want that item. Depending on how you're using this, it could be a little bit unethical. You've probably have gone to web pages before. I'm sure everybody, all of us have done this, where you go to a web page and by default, they have you agreeing to the cookies or agreeing to subscribe to the newsletter, and you have to uncheck that box in order to deselect. That's what they're doing. They're marking that particular checkbox or radio button as checked. You can use checked inside of one radio button too to pre-check it, pre-select it. And obviously it makes the user have to deselect something. It's kind of forcing them into something. Years ago, when I was a student over at University of South Florida, and I went to college in the early 90s, there was a online application form. And by default, they had it checked so that every student would be donating to the USF fund, or so, it was some environmental fund. And there was a lawsuit, a class action lawsuit about that. And they had to stop doing that because, as you can imagine, a customer, a student wouldn't necessarily notice that that little box was pre-checked. And so they were automatically donating to a cause that maybe they didn't agree with or didn't want to donate to. And it required people to really read this statement carefully and uncheck a box if they didn't want to donate to this environmental group. So yeah, that was a little bit of a sketchier, unethical situation where you're kind of tricking people into signing up for or paying some kind of thing. I'm going to leave that on there though. Now, it could be useful. I mean, maybe one of these options has to be selected, you know. Can't think of a good example of what, but, you know, maybe that's a legitimate reason. Okay. How's everyone doing? That's 5 different input controls we've got here. Feeling okay about this stuff? I know it's tricky. And it's probably weird thinking, yeah, you're not really going to use it in this class. So maybe it's hard to really be too excited about it. But there are a number of classes where these kinds of things do come up quite a bit. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is a little tricky. And it's new syntax. And that's the other reason I really want you to save this page, because you will reference it later on. I mean, obviously there's plenty of great references on the web to remind you how to do this stuff, but there's going to be a time, sometime in February or sometime in April, where you want to create a set of checkboxes or radio buttons. And it'll be nice to jump over to this old page you made back in November to kind of remind yourself of the syntax for that. I am leaving out a number of things, like I'm not putting in the actual form tags, but we're getting the trickier aspects. So those are radio buttons there. And then we got some check boxes. Let's do another one here. How am I doing on time? Oh, time's flying. I spent all that time with that Emmett stuff. Okay, let's go for example number 6. Like I said, I'm going to publish this right here at the end of class, so you can always check out mine. I don't want you to just copy and paste, but you can always bring my page up and look at the code and type it along as you're looking at it. I don't want you to just select text and copy and paste. That takes all the fun out of it, of course. So example 6, what do we want to do for example 6? How about a selection menu? I'm a big fan of selection menus, and they're quite a bit different. With select menus, I am going to do a label for select one, select an option, ooh, okay, well, one of your classmates just sent me a quick little question via chat, and I will make sure we address that. But actually, I can kind of tell you right now. Go there, go there. Yeah, I've cleaned it up. I don't have as much stuff on there as I used to, but that's kind of where I stick them. Now let me send this out to everybody. There we go. Yeah, so I got the last thing I did was a very simple table. So there's my address with a picture of the Lambeau Field in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Okay, so I've got my label for select an option, sure thing. And then I'm going to do a select tag. So I'm not using an input tag this time. Am I done with input tags? There's actually a couple of other input tags, but I don't think I'm going to show you. There's a input type data set, or can't remember the syntax for it. But I think we got all the major inputs. So there's really probably just this one and a text area box that I want to show you. So we could be done here very, very quickly. So let's see, select ID equals select one. And then in between the opening and closing select tag. So yeah, there's an opening and closing select tag here, which is different. Remember with inputs, there's no closing input. I don't think I mentioned that before, but an input tag is just like a singleton tag. It just sits there by itself. In between my opening and closing select tags, I'm going to do option value equals, I like to do value 0 is the first one. And this will be the first or the default option. And I'm going to do a copy paste. This will be value 1, and this will be my, I'll say first option there. The first one will be my default option. I'll just do a couple of these. So let's see, copy, paste, 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 paste. Do a few of them, I guess. Value 2, value 3, value 4, value 5. Got my first, got my second, got my third, and my fourth, and my fifth. Yeah, I think that's reasonable enough. Yeah. So the selection menu, there's an opening and closing select tag. And then in between those tags, there's a series of options. Each of these options has its own value. There's no ID for these, which is normal. No ID, no name. I think just that. I think that's all we really need for these. Now, they're going to look kind of small. I might want to change the font size of my select menu so that way it looks bigger, kind of like I did for that text box. I'll do that in just a minute. So let me leave this on screen for a moment so people can kind of absorb this. Label looks pretty normal. My opening select tag contains the ID that connects to the label 4 attribute. And then I've got options, opening and closing tags for those. And then my closing select tag is down there. Now I know this is going to look pretty tiny on my screen, so I'm going to scroll right up to my CSS. And let's see, I'm going to go to where my text box is, I think. Yeah, I'm going to add one right in here. I'm just going to put select. So I'm basically just adding the select, which is weird because it's like a type selector. I'm adding the select type selector to there because I'm just changing the font size and adding padding. I think that's going to look okay. Let's see if I'm lying to you. Yeah, that looks fine to me. Let me do this while I'm up here. You don't have to do this part. I'm going to do a quick PB colon 800. I just want to put a big padding bottom so I can scroll there. So now you can really see, select an option. I got my default option. The first option in a select menu is always the default. And then I can click on this and I can choose from one of my other options. Let's go back to the HTML. So the CSS, not too exciting. And back on the old HTML. Okay, let me do one more and then we'll call it good. So I'm just going to get 7 here. So let me jump over real quick. I'm going to go over here, go to weekly activities. Go to week 10. I'm going to edit this. Edit the participation 10 input controls. at least, just give me 7. I don't know if we already have 7 or not. We'll get to 7 soon. 7 key form inputs. Yeah. There's a couple others that we could do too. There's a type equals date, input type date, if we want to have a date picker. There's an input type time. There's an input type number, which I think was on my agenda to show you, but I kind of pushed them off. So input type date, input type time, input type number. There's another input type data set or something like that, which is kind of neat because it's a text box that gives you some choices, which is pretty cool. So there's several that I'm not showing you. Of course, telephone and URL and email and things like that. So now for our participation, we just need to get 7 of these done. Let's see, let me jump back over to my code. Hey, look at that, I'm on number 7. Nice. Let's put in a text area box. Text area box, all right. I'm gonna give it a label. Label 4 equals text area 1. Enter message. And then after that, I'm going to do a text area tag with ID equals text area 1. And so with the text area tag, there's actually an opening and a closing tag. And we're not going to put anything in between those tags. I do want to style it a little bit, but yeah, let's style it right here. Style equals font size 1.3 M, semicolon, width 500 pixels, and height 200 pixels. All right, this looks a little tricky. Notice I don't typically do this. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this, but inline styles. Sometimes inline styles can be your friend. So some of you might be aware that starting this winter term, we're switching over to a product called Canvas instead of Blackboard. So I've been learning the Canvas system lately, and I'm feeling pretty good about it now. I've spent several weeks on it, getting used to it and stuff. I still have a lot of work to do before winter term classes start, but I feel like I'm getting all the basics down. And of course, I like HTML and I like styling things and stuff like that. In Canvas, if I want to customize stuff, they've taken away some of my ability to do so, but I've learned that I can use inline styles quite effectively. So I'm using a ton of inline styles in my Canvas environment so that I can style things and how they look and stuff. Okay. For the most part, you use it the same way as you use any CSS. You put a style attribute inside of the tag that you want to manipulate. And then, of course, I just put in all of my declarations separated by semicolons, all within quotes there. Pretty normal. So now if I look at this on my browser, I should have, oh, that's not as exciting as I was hoping. Oh, there we go. I had to refresh. Now I get a multi-line text box. Yeah, here you go. So a text area box gives you the opportunity to put in multiple lines of text, whereas a text box gives you just one line of text, limited to 255 characters. This one really is feasibly unlimited. So yeah, so that's a text area box. Coolio. Okay. I like that. There's my text area. It's pretty simple, except I just put all those inline styles in there, which kind of added to the look and the complexity. I'm almost ready to publish. I'm going to do something that I meant to show you this when we were doing tables, but I didn't do it then. And then I didn't have class. We didn't do a remote session on our second table day, which I'm cool with, but let me do this. I want to alternate the look of these. What am I doing here? These are divs, right? Yeah, divs. Divs within what? Divs within an article. Okay, check this out real quick. I'm going to go up to my styles. Article, div, colon, nth child, even. Background color, sandy brown. It's not doing what I thought it would do. Did I screw something up? Div. Oh, my little scripts in there are kind of breaking it, I think. Yeah, I got those little script tags and those are kind of breaking what I was going to show you. So, all right, no big deal. Basically, if you do something like this, in many situations, you can get it to work just nice, very, very well. But because I threw those little script tags in a couple places, it's kind of breaking this. But what this would have done is it would have given a background color to every even numbered div within my article. And is that what I have? Yep, yeah. So obviously my second one, my first one, or my second one, my fourth, and my sixth one would have had those colors. So that's what's going on there. I wonder, can I do it this way? No, that would be nth of type. Yeah, that's okay. So this little demonstration is not working as nicely as I would have hoped. Now, what I suppose I could have done, I don't know if I want to do this, but I guess I will. These little chunks of script don't have to be where they are currently listed. I could take these little scripts, cut them, and stick them all the way to the bottom of my page just before the closing body tag. So let me go find my other script. I'm going to cut it and paste it all the way down here. I don't necessarily like doing that because now they're not close to what I wanted to show you, but however, I think doing that now is going to get all of my even boxes colored that way, which I think looks a little bit better. So just as another example here, and then I'm going to publish this page and make sure everybody knows where to find it. So I'm going to go back up to my CSS and I'm going to add some padding of 10 pixels. There we go. And now I should be able to do something also with the odds. So article div colon nth child odd background color, and I'll do FFC. It's a light shade of yellow, padding 8 pixels. That's good. So now I should have a nice little alternating band. Yeah, you can decide how good that looks. You'll pick better colors than me, I'm sure. So there we go. So that's nth child even, nth child odd, so that you can alternate the styling of elements. In the table activity, I was going to do that with alternating rows. So I would do this with TR tags. Alternating TR tags would have different background colors, so you can alternate the rows in large tables, but works nice there. So don't leave me quite yet. I'm going to open up, file, open file. I'm going to go to my index page, which is my home page, card demo page, ahref equals form inputs.html. And I just need to put a little text in there. Sample input controls, little text. Otherwise, things are looking good. So there's I just updated my index page so that it's going to have a hyperlink to my participation page. Alrighty, I've got that. I'm good with this. So let me open up WinSCP. It's on my other screen here. Let me click on that. It's going to sign in. That's not what I want to show you. I want to show you this. Okay, I'm signed in. I need to go to my 195 folder. I'm on 195 on the right on the server. I need to make sure I'm in the right folder. I'm in my JavaScript area. So let me go up into my 195 folder. I'm looking at things the last time I changed them. So I can see there's my index page. There's my form inputs. I'm going to take those and drag them over. Now, today was kind of simple for me in that I didn't use any images. So there's no images for me to worry about. I didn't do any external styles. So there's no styles for me to worry about. All I needed to do was update those 2 web pages, which means if I click on the hyperlink, which is in the chat window to my 95 page, it takes me there. And there's my sample input controls. So if I click on that, it takes me to that page where I could view the source code and see what was going on there. And yeah, so I think that will conclude our participation 10. So if you would be so kind have at least 7 examples of form input controls. You can do the same 7 I did, or if you mix it up a little, that's perfectly fine. Make sure there's a link on your home page that leads me to this page, and I'll check it out in a couple days. And when I do some more grading and things like that, and yeah, measly 5 points, but just hold on to this page, hold on to all your pages so you can reference them later on. Don't forget, so that's my page there. I sent you the web address to this cheat sheet. I'll do that again though. That's the Emmett cheat sheet. And I see they have a printable PDF version. I might do that the next time I'm at work. I might actually get the PDF version because sometimes it's nice having a quick little cheat sheet and paper as I'm typing some stuff. So I might do that, maybe. And let me close that. Don't need that anymore. And that will conclude our participation 10. I can close that. I'm going to go back to this and what you're taking care of. So after you finish participation 10, you're obviously enjoying the holiday. But if you are like me and you lack a social life, then you're going to be hanging out and you're going to keep doing work. You're going to be tweaking some old assignment pages that maybe you feel like you need to tweak. You're going to be looking ahead into your week 11 stuff. And week 11 is developing the small hobby website. I'm pretty sure we're not going to have any remote class sessions, but I think what I'll do is I'm going to have office hours during our class time on Tuesday and Thursday of next week, and I'll just hang out. So if you want to tap in and share your screen and show me something that you're working on, we can kind of brainstorm a little bit and do that kind of stuff. But otherwise, it's going to be a normal week. There's participation activities, there's quizzing, and there's assignmenting to take care of. So thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll let you go and have a nice trip. If you're traveling, travel safe. If you're on a flight, like Daniel, I think is on an airplane, he's going to make sure he masks up. Okay. That's all for your weekends. See y'all.